This is a 1963 Morris Mini Cooper Mk1, and this is my 1963 Mini. It was quite revolutionary for its time, being one of the first cars around with a front engine transversal layout with front wheel drive, which gave the interior of the car a lot more room. It is quite an iconic car as well, being used by the likes of Mr. Bean and the stars of The Italian Job. And today, I'm going to review it and show you all of its quirks and features. Now before we get started, be sure to check out the rest of the channel and consider subscribing, because only 1% of you guys are currently subscribed. Now, back to the video. Alright, now before I get into the review, I want to tell you a little bit of history about this car. This car's turning 60 years old this year, which is incredible considering the condition it is in, which is really good. A lot of Minis are known for rusting out the bottom, but this one, no rust at all, so I got a good deal. Now, this car is becoming quite rare, being a one of four in my city of around 700,000 people, and they're just going to get rarer. Now, let's get into the review. Anyways, time for the quirks and features of the Mk1 Mini. Let's start with the exterior. And I suppose you could say that the Mini is, well, quite mini. The shape of it is quite simple and square, like most other things that came out of this era of British cars, like the Land Rover Series 1. The Mini also had quite a few quirky variants, such as the sedan I have here, a wagon which had wood panelling on it, a ute which would fit quite well with the Australian market, and the Moke, which was an off-road design designed for the military, but they laughed at it and they sold it as a civilian production vehicle instead. The Mini tyres are also 10 inches in size. Like, that is my hand, that's how small they are, and they're incredible. The rear of the Mini has quite a couple quirks and features at the back. We can start off with the license plate, which folds upwards, and this may be a random feature, but it has a very, very useful purpose later on, which I'll show you. And the boot is different to most other boots on every other car, as it opens downwards. The license plate folds down so it can still be read from behind if you're carrying a large load that didn't quite fit in the boot. Quite a smart way to increase storage space. But anyway, let's talk powertrains in the Mk1 Mini and how to open the bonnet. You might think there will be a latch on the inside of the car, in the cabin, but no, it's at the front of the car where you have to shove your head into a hole to unlatch it before opening. That's pretty interesting. Now, the engine. It was originally offered with a single 850cc motor, which then upped to a 998cc motor, and then an 1100cc motor. But this has got the 1275cc, which came in the Cooper S, and is the performance machine that won Bathurst not once, but twice, and the Monte Carlo Rally 3 times. That is pretty impressive. Now let's start her up and hear a rev. Next up is the interior of the Mini, which is very empty looking at this. It only has 3 dials and 3 switches. Those switches are for the lights, the wipers, and the choke. Looking at the speedometer, it is centered and reads in miles per hour, which doesn't help when in a country like Australia, which uses kilometers per hour. Funnily enough, the pedals in the Mini are quite like the car itself. They're incredibly mini. The Mini has this interesting shelf-like structure that goes across the car and acts like a dashboard, seeing as there isn't one. However, it is quite handy for a phone or any other item you'd want to chuck up there. A quirky addition to the Mini is the amount of ashtrays in the car. There are 3 in this car alone. There's 1 in the front and 2 in the back. This is for whenever a passenger or the driver would want to light one up. Onto seating. There's plenty of space up front, and more importantly, the rear seats in the back are quite roomy, being easily able to fit 4 people who are over 6 foot into the car at once, with headroom and legroom being very nice. The horn itself is quite quirky, as it's not in the middle of the steering wheel as you'd expect, Press that, nothing happens, but it's this button here. Very cool. Onto the doors. They are very old in design and have this interesting bit of metal, chunk of metal stuck to the frame of the door. However, they are very light and easy to use most of the time. Now, interestingly in this car, the driver's side door doesn't work from the inside and it only works from the outside. Pretty quirky. The Mini also comes equipped with vent windows for cooling on a very hot day like it always is in Australia. Now it's time to get her on the road and see how she drives. Alright, taking her out on the road to see how she drives. Starting in a bit of traffic, you know, not the best, but could definitely be worse. This car also comes standard with straight cut gears, so you'll probably hear them whining like now. So she gets up to speed fairly slowly, about 0 to 60 in 12.3 seconds. Could definitely be worse, but not the quickest thing on the road. I forgot to mention as well that this car only has one exterior mirror, which is quirky in of itself, but the blind spots in this car are so big and the visibility is incredible, you don't really need them that much. And the handling on this is just so perfect because there's no power steering or any computers to change the input of it. It just works like that. It is a wonderful car to drive. Not every day, of course, but it definitely could be driven every day. It just wants to go. Doesn't like traffic that much, but it definitely copes. It has drum brakes, so stopping in it is not very fast, but it only weighs 600 kilos, so it does come to a halt pretty quickly. Bit of traffic up ahead. Let's go find a fun little road to drive on. Just the way the engine roars up a hill, even though it's only doing around 60 kilometers an hour, about 40 mile an hour ish, it just wants to like rev all the way out, which is really good considering it is 60 years old. Can't see through this intersection. Sometimes the speedo doesn't want to work as a proper speedometer, as you can see here. It says we're doing 90 when in actuality we're probably doing 60 kilometers an hour, which is always pretty fun. Time for a roundabout. Oh, got her sideways a little bit. Just magnificent, this vehicle, and the way it just drives and everything it has to do about it. I would not sell this or trade it in for the world. It is the best thing I've ever driven in my life, next to a go-kart, as I said earlier. In traffic it does get a little iffy because first gear is like nothing and then second gear is also fairly short, but third gear's too long for it to be viable in like start-stop traffic. So, and first doesn't have a synchro, so it's a bit tough. However, that'll be the end of the drive, and back to me. So that is a 1963 Mini Cooper Mk1. This car might be lacking in a lot of areas, such as speed, and modern driver comforts like aircon and a radio, but it makes up all for that with its personality and quirkiness. There's absolutely nothing like this on the roads today, and it really shows. It handles like a go-kart, it likes to slide through corners, and it can fit in any parking spot that your heart desires. It can slip through small gaps in traffic, and it also brings a lot of attention to itself and makes everyone turn and smile at it because everyone loves a Mini. Its quirkiness and icon status of having incredible handling result in a car that is ultra fun to drive while also managing a pinch of old practicality. Now it's time to give the Mk1 Mini a Pug Score. Starting with the weekend category and styling, the Mini styling is exceptional, iconic and timeless, so it gets a 10 out of 10. Acceleration is quite slow compared to everything around it, but being a 4-speed manual with around 50 horsepower, it gets a 3 out of 10. Handling is astonishing even compared to the most modern machinery, and the only fair handling comparison I can truly make with it is a go-kart, so it gets a 10 out of 10. The fun factor. The fun factor of the Mini is unreal and will put a smile on your face if you ever see one or get to drive one. So it gets a 10 out of 10. The cool factor. The cool factor receives the same score as the fun factors. Everyone loves a Mini, and everyone loves to see in such a unique car. 10 out of 10. That brings the weekend category to a total of 43 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories, and starting with features, the Mini doesn't have many, however the ones it does have are very practical. 6 out of 10. Comfort. Comfort is well above average for a car that is 6 inches off the ground and 60 years old. But the plentiful rear headroom and legroom provide an excellent ride. It gets a 7 out of 10. The quality of a Mini is incredible. Being able to be driven 60 years later with barely any rust shows how well these cars are made, and the reliability of the Mini is somewhat questionable at times. However, the solutions are always very simple and easy to fix. 9 out of 10. The practicality of the Mini is high, as it is designed to be as practical as possible to fit as much space they could in such a small area. It was also designed to be the best city car around, which it definitely succeeds at, so it gets an 8 out of 10. And finally, there is value. The value of the Mini is very high, considering as it's still relatively cheap compared to much of the newer cars that are on the used car market at the moment. I bought this for well below the used car average, and there isn't much more that could be asked from such a capable, dependable, and reliable machine. It gets a 10 out of 10. This brings a daily score to 40 out of 50, and added up, the Pug Score is 83 out of 100, which places a 1963 Mini Cooper Mk1 here against other cars that have been reviewed. It smoked the competition, being an incredibly fun weekend car while also maintaining its practicality and daily drive capabilities for over 60 years, giving it the highest Pug Score to date.